quick overview of what is required in order for you to be able to use and access the features and functions of BIM 360 Design with Civil 3D. And then I wanted to go into some of the workflows that are directly related to Civil 3D projects. I mentioned data shortcuts earlier. You can also create and save files in the cloud using the desktop connector. And we can also set up our folder structures using some of the shortcut features within the data shortcuts workflows. On top of that, there are some additional collaboration tools that are available to us now that we have access to BIM 360 Docs in the cloud. We can actually use Infraworks in the cloud and host Infraworks models there, as well as do a live collaborative design on Infraworks models that are hosted inside of our Docs locations. We can also work with Revit a little bit more efficiently now with the option to do shared coordinates and publish those coordinate files directly to a Docs location, and also publishing surfaces, which has been out for a couple of versions now. There is an option to publish surfaces directly from Civil 3D to BIM 360 Docs, and then that will work as a linked topography surface inside of Revit. So some of these features have been around for a little longer than others. There are also some features that are related to subscription extensions. So as you know, or as you may know, Civil 3D 2021 is now out, but subscription extensions usually take a little while longer to get released than the actual software itself. So there are a couple of tools, especially shared coordinates, that you'll see as a subscription extension. It's currently available for the 2020 product line. But as of this morning, I did not see anything available for download for 2021 yet. So that specific tool for sharing coordinates and publishing surfaces out. Actually, published surfaces should be in there. Shared coordinates is the one that comes from subscription extension. So that's not yet available as far as I know for both Revit 2021 and Civil 3D 2021. But you can still get to those using the 2020 version of the products. So let's talk a little bit first about the required installations here. Within Civil 3D itself, we would need to be using at least the Civil 3D 2020.2 update version or later. At this point, we are up to the 2020.4 update for Civil 3D, and that is available through anyone that's got subscription. You can log into your manage.autodesk.com or use your Autodesk Desktop Manager to get to those updates there. So from the 2020.2 update, that's where you would see the new BIM 360 features and functions appearing in your software. If you're on a pre-2020.2 version, then you're not going to have access to the full design capabilities. And then if you're in 2021, it's already built into that, so you don't need to run the update for that one. In addition to the updates there, you would also need to install the Autodesk Desktop Connector, which is a separate application that runs sort of in the background and works as the communication tool that transfers the file and data from Civil 3D to BIM 360. So the Desktop Connector is sort of this background application that when you save something from Civil 3D, it's going to post it to the BIM 360 location for you. So it's really the tie-in there. You're not working directly from BIM 360. You're actually working from a cached folder on your C drive that the Desktop Connector is then feeding and coordinating back and forth to the cloud. Finally, in addition to those two things, of course, you would need a BIM 360 design entitlement in order to get to all the features and functions. If you have any questions about whether you would want BIM 360 design versus BIM 360 docs, you can contact your account manager and start a conversation there. In order to get to the data shortcut workflows, the capabilities of establishing working folders and project folders and using data shortcuts from the cloud, you would need the full design entitlement. If you're just looking for ways to access files from a shared folder location that's non-network. So in this case, similar to having just a cloud folder that you can go to and download full files and save files to, then docs should be okay. But if you are looking to expand to the full Civil 3D workflows with data shortcuts and everything else directly from the cloud, then you would need that design entitlement. Design does come with docs, so if you purchase the design entitlement, you would have the full access to docs there as well. So those three things, the update for Civil 3D, the desktop connector, and your BIM 360 design entitlement, those are the three things that you would need before you can get started with any of the cloud collaboration type workflows here. If you are currently a design subscriber and you have the Civil 3D updates and desktop connector available, you would then be able to either join a project that someone else is hosting or host your own projects and then invite members there as well. So you do not need to be the owner of the project in order to participate and use these features and functions. You would just need to have all of these items installed and available to use the features and functions in any project that you are a member of. So once you have all of those things, the BIM 360 online portion starts out with access to the BIM 360 portal. So within BIM 360 online, as you log in there, depending on the level of access that you have, you would be able to perhaps get to the administrative level, to docs, to glue, to project management. Many of these things might be separate purchases, but in the case where we're looking primarily at BIM 360 design and docs from a Civil 3D standpoint, our two primary areas are going to be the account admin section and then project admin sections. So starting out with account admin, I don't want to spend too much time here because it's a lot of just administrative setup and settings. With account admin, that's where you're going to go from your sort of company level, and you're going to be able to add members there. You can create company profiles for consultants and contractors that you work with. You can predefine roles for different members and different companies that you are going to work with to sort of speed up the process of assigning certain entitlements and features and capabilities within the projects themselves. And then this is also where you're going to create the actual projects. So you can create your projects, you can create company profiles, you can add members and everything through the account admin. And that's going to be on your main page. I've just switched over to BIM 360 in the online portal here, and you can see that I have account admin. This is under our Imagine It hub, so I can see all of the projects that currently exist under the hub. I can switch to our members tab and see all of the different members that we have, perhaps from different companies, different roles. So I've got a number of different companies that we've worked with, different roles that can be pre-assigned. And one of the benefits to the roles is that when you're adding in a specific member and you know that they're going to need a certain level of access or a certain amount of access to different features, project management, for example, or model coordination or design collaboration for Revit, you can go ahead and preset a role and then have these different features already sort of set up as a default. Then when you add a member, you just assign them that particular role, and those settings should carry on over to that. Now, once you've got your administrative side set up and you're ready to start projects, you would just be then creating a project here. And once you have a project available, you would then see it and be able to switch to that specific project to get to a secondary level of administration. So when we're looking at project admin here, now what we're trying to see and trying to control is membership and roles and responsibilities specific to the project itself. So I have a project called C4C3D Demo, which I use for quite a few different things here within the company and a lot of testing. And we have a number of different members. So some of these members are technical staff that are on as engineers. We've got a couple of different managers on here, one as an owner who's got different levels of access compared to the engineers. And then I, as the owner of the project, not necessarily the owner in a role, but the owner of the project I created, and I'm the administrator. I have access to everything. So depending on the role that you're in, you are able to select or deselect any of these particular features and functions to enable the access to the users that you apply. We can add more users here. We can add more companies, or actually, excuse me, the companies will populate as the users are added. So if I add a user who's linked to a company, then the company there will automatically appear. Now, under the project administration dropdown, this is actually where we get to the document management piece. And the document management piece is really where everything lives in terms of BIM 360 and how we use it and how it functions for civil and infrastructure environment. So once we have our project set up, we're really now just able to house and keep everything in the cloud as opposed to having to store it locally on our individual systems or in a network environment where there's a lot of IT security. If you're on an internal private network, you might need to get VPN access. If you're not connected to the network, then you may not even have access to that altogether. Or if it's an outside firm that you're now collaborating with, you have to go through the process of trying to get them cleared for access to your internal network since they're an outside vendor. So there's a whole bunch of different logistics that are involved in trying to get someone onto sort of an internal private network, compared to now we have an online cloud location with BIM 360 docs that we have secure access to. We can invite members as long as they've got accounts set up and entitlements that are required there. We can add them as a member and they can get to these files and folders without having to worry about all of the network issues that come along with other methods. And if you're worried about security, things like that, there's a lot of things that are living in the cloud now. Online banking is technically in the cloud, so we're still thinking of it in a similar fashion as that. So if you can trust online banking, we can probably trust document management here. So once I've got the document management location set up here, I can see that I have a file structure, a folder structure, and this is now going to be very, very similar to how we would manage our projects anywhere else, but now it's just basically housed inside of BIM 360. So we've gone past the administrative pieces with account admin and project admin, and we're now looking at how we can get to that BIM 360 docs location from our project folders and project applications. So we can see through the online portal that we have all of these folders and features set up. Now, if I'm not in the online portal, and this is just a web browser that I've logged in through, if I need to get to this from my system or from the application itself, the desktop connector will create a BIM 360 system folder on your drive. So inside of my system folder here now, this is Windows Explorer. Once the desktop connector is installed, I'll see the BIM 360 location show up as a system drive that I can get to, and navigating my way to that BIM 360 project and these BIM 360 folder locations is as simple as navigating to any other location that I would get to through my Windows Explorer File Explorer system. So I can see project files here. It's the same project files that I have in the online viewer. And when I access that, I have the same project folder setup as I would see available here. So anytime I need to open files, anytime I need to get to some files and see those files there, I can always navigate my way to those locations. Now this is syncing in the background automatically through the desktop connector. So you really don't have to worry about manually getting to these folders and syncing everything there. When you're opening a file from Civil 3D, you're gonna use that BIM 360 system folder to navigate your way to the file. But once it's opened up, you're just gonna work normally as you would in any other standard Civil 3D project. But what you can do with the Windows Explorer is just kind of verify and make sure that all of the folder locations are there. If you need to create new folders or create new subfolders, maybe you're bringing on an architectural consultant and you need an architectural folder here, all you need to do is simply add a subfolder. And this would be a very similar method to how you would do any other folder navigation in other programs. I just did a right click there to add a subfolder. There's also this ellipsis, the ... icon that we're used to seeing in a bunch of different menus and drop downs throughout our Autodesk software. And you can see that gets you to the same sort of shortcut menu. Once these folders are all created and set up, that's sort of now where you need to be able to determine who's going to have access to that and how you want to manage the users. So any members that are part of the project, by default, they're just members of the project. You then need to give them access to the folders that you want to share with them. So if I do have an architect that I'm working with and I want to give them full control over the Revit folders here, then I would want to make sure that I get to my permissions and I make sure that any architect or any consultant related to architectural work would have full access to these folders. So in this case, I can see James or Archie or myself. We have full view, download, upload, and edit control. I have full folder control. Archie has full folder control. So we're basically, we can do anything we want. But then Richard is on here as well with only view and download. So Richard does not have full control over that. So in this case, maybe he's not directly related to the architecture collaboration piece, but we want him to be able to still see and download files if he needs to get to them, just not able to edit or do anything more than that. So once we have all of these access permissions granted there, we can set them up for specific folders individually. And that is really the current recommendation, because any folder access permission that you set for a higher level folder automatically gets transferred down to subfolders. So if I gave someone full permission to the project files folder, which is our main folder here, they would then have full permission to everything else below it. So if you do want to keep architect level permission specific for architectural folders, civil permission specific for civil, then you would want to go to each of the folders individually and set up those permissions for the members themselves. And that's going to allow you to have a lot more control over who can do what in each file and each folder that's housed within your project. So now that we've got our BIM 360 project set up, we know how to access those folders, we know how to create folders, and we know how to find them from our system. We can take a look at how the actual BIM 360 for Civil 3D piece is going to work. So I talked about the top here where I've got that system drive. Now we're going to take a look a little bit at the actual Civil 3D specific features that are available to us. And I'm going to open up Civil 3D, or just switch back to Civil 3D here. I see a number of workflow questions popping up, so let me address those closer to the end of the session during the Q&A, because that's going to be a little bit more in depth, I think. So going into Civil 3D here, the one big change that we're going to see from the standard Civil 3D over to the 2020.2 with BIM 360 capabilities is when you're switching over to the Start tab. The Start tab changes pretty dramatically when you're installing the 2020.2 update, because now not only do you have the standard locations and files and recent files and documents to get to, but you also have a BIM 360 location that you can access. And because we have now a combination of local files or cloud-based files, we see different indicators appearing near the file names to let us know where these are coming from. So you can see from this recent files list, I have a number of files at the top that are cloud-based, and there's a little blue cloud icon. And then I also still have our standard files, or my standard files, I should say, that are locally paths. So it will indicate whether you're working from a cloud location or local file when you're looking at the file names themselves. If you're looking for a way to navigate to those files and open those files from our BIM 360 projects, what you do have here as well is a shortcut to your BIM 360 location here on the left. And then as you access that BIM 360 location, you'll see a drop-down list of all of the projects that you are a current member of. So this is going to populate with any project that you are an active member of. That way, you're not just looking at a full list of every project that's in your hub or anything like that. You're just going to see the projects that you are participating in. So I can switch to my C4 C3D demo, and I see that same project files folder location, and then within that I see the subfolders that I saw, same subfolders that I saw online as well. So the same set of subfolders here on the left now appear for me available here inside of the Start menu when I look at that BIM 360 location. And if I need to get to any of those folders, I can simply go to that location and it will show me the information there. The added benefit to being able to access this through Civil 3D's interface directly is also the fact that I can now see the versioning information and the authoring information live right there in the program. So I can see, for example, my grading file here is only on version 2. So that means I likely uploaded it to BIM 360 Docs, created version 1, and then I opened it and saved it again, and that became version 2. On the other hand, I have a corridors drawing that's up to version 13 here. So version 13 meaning there have been 12 different instances where I've opened and made edits and saved that, and that's now tracking up to version 13 inside of the file. From this interface, you're not able to get to the previous versions, but you can get to previous versions through the online portal and then set any version current to make that the one that you want to access here. This one is just sort of giving you that information for the time being. So I know that version 13 that was created on June 11th, that's the current one that is there active in the project. And then if I need to open any of these files, I can simply click on them. This one here called Site Grading, you can see is already opened. So when someone has it open, you'll see a lock icon, and then if you hover over that, it'll show you that it's locked by me in this case on this date and that time. And you can see that I do have it here open in the background. So that's just the indicator there. One of the other things that I wanted to point out is I do have 3 different files open currently in my Civil 3D session, and they're not all from the same project. So it is really behaving just like a system drive. You can get to any project, any folder, and open a drawing from there. It doesn't have to be all living in the same folder, living in the same BIM 360 project. You are now essentially just using it as a location that you can store objects and store drawing files and share drawing files too. So we know how to get to those files. We know some of the things that have been updated and some of the things that have a little bit of a different view inside of Civil 3D once we have those design BIM 360 design components installed. Now let's take a look at what types of workflow enhancements are going to come from having access to BIM 360 design. So number one, the biggest thing that comes out of BIM 360 design entitlements with Civil 3D is the ability to leverage your data shortcut workflows in the cloud. So right now, or previous versions of Civil 3D, data shortcuts were always sort of limited by the fact that they needed to be file specific and path specific. So if I had something on a C drive, it had to be on the C drive, and whoever needed to get to it needed to be able to get to that C drive. If it was on a network drive called the M drive, anyone that needed to get to that would have to have access to the M drive and have to have access to that folder. And if there was no real way around it. Now what we have is the option to share data shortcuts through BIM 360. And really what's the only difference there is now when you're setting your working folder, you are navigating your way to your BIM 360 hub as opposed to your network or your C drive. So the workflow here inside of Civil 3D is the same. The only difference is when you're setting your working folder, you are now going to navigate to that hub location, and you would then be setting up your Civil 3D data shortcut projects within your BIM 360 hub instead of on your network. Once that happens, you'll see a cloud icon showing up there next to your BIM 360, excuse me, next to your data shortcut path, indicating that is a BIM 360 location. And then if you hover over that, you'll see that it starts out with a BIM 360 path and then giving you the hub and the project information all the way down to your data shortcuts folder. One additional sort of background advantage to this is if you are in the early stages of project setup and you're trying to work within the BIM 360 online portal to get all of your folders and subfolders created, typically what you would need to do is go through and create subfolders one at a time. So you would right click, create a subfolder, and then create that subfolder. And if you've got subfolders inside of subfolders, you would then need to go through and keep right clicking and keep adding more and more subfolders there. But we can actually leverage the BIM 360 location through your data shortcuts option that's creating a new data shortcut project folder and set up one of these project templates. So if you've got project templates that you've preset, which are essentially just blank folder structures, it's folders within folders with names and the proper subfolders and settings there, you can create a series of these project templates and then simply choose to establish one of these project folder structures inside of your BIM 360 location. So you would be setting up your working folder to point it to that BIM 360 project, and then you would use a project template to then drop in all of the subfolders there for you. And creating these project templates are are fairly straightforward. It's basically just creating a whole bunch of empty folders, but giving them the right names and, of course, establishing the right folder structure. Once they're there, you just create that project folder using the data shortcuts option, and then you're going to see a whole bunch of new folders ready to go inside of BIM 360 Docs. So within BIM 360 Docs, nothing really changes within the workflow itself, other than having the ability to navigate your way to the Docs location for the working folder and the project folder. You're still going to want to manage your data shortcuts the same way. You're still going to be able to use data shortcuts for projects and drawings that they're associated with. When you're switching from project to project, you're going to want to make sure that you're updating your working folder and updating your project folder so that you're looking at the right files there. So all of that is very, very similar. The big difference, again, is that you are then now working with a location that is cloud-based. And because it is cloud-based, if I have a consultant that's not from my organization that still needs to get to my data shortcuts, or they still need to share something or see something, maybe I'm working with a structural consultant that's building a big utility box for me, and they need to get to my surfaces, or they need to see some corridor information because they need to know how their utility box is going to fit relative to my corridor. I'm not a structural engineer, but I might be subbing that out to another consultant. So I'm going to want to make sure that they have access to all of the pieces of my design that they need in order to create that custom structure correctly. And of course, in the old days, or I guess I shouldn't exactly say old days, in the previous workflows that we had, there's a lot of email communication. So there's a lot of information that was transferred through like a second or third step process where I'm creating this stuff in Civil 3D, and then I'm going to save it, and I'm going to write an email, and I'm going to make sure that I attach the file to the email and send that out. And then on the other end, they're going to receive the email, they're going to download it and save it, and then bring it into their drawing. And in the time that it takes for me to do all of that and them to do all of that, it might be 3 or 4 different revisions down the line on my side. So, how does that communication process keep up with the most current versions of data that's out there? With BIM 360, the fact that it's available there online, when I click save, it's going to post a new version to the cloud, and they're going to be able to see, this version was created on this date by this person. As long as they're a member of the project, they can then just go back and say, if I've got the latest thing, I know I'm working with the most current piece of data, and I'm not going to worry about the coordination aspect of that or keeping everything updated, because we are now essentially working from the same place. There's no sort of middle data transfer thing that we need to deal with, like emails and VPNs, or not, excuse me, not VPNs, or file transfer systems and so forth. When you're working with data shortcuts from BIM 360, you can also do a refresh or check reference status option. So in this case, I've got a couple of different drawings open here. I've got one called my site grading plan that's got a little building and site layout, and then I've got another one with an alignment and profile, or called alignment and profile, that's got like a road or driveway center line available there to me. So if I need to work with this, perhaps my consultant is working on the building layout or the site grading, and then I'm working on the driveway and the road improvements here. They need to see where that alignment is going to fall based on their location of the building. Then we would want to make sure that we're all tied into the same BIM 360 project. We've all got the same working folders and everything set up. And then they're basically just going to create a reference to that road the same way that they would in a normal scenario. So I do that, and I can now see, hey, my road here is actually going the wrong way. So my building's been moved. Perhaps in our initial discussion, we had talked about having the building in that lower right corner, southeast corner of the site. Now it's sort of in the middle, sort of western end of the site there. So if I am the consultant and I'm working on a BIM 360 project, what I would probably do is go back and I would say, I've got this civil design folder that I'm a part of. I see that my drawing is called site grading, but your drawing is called alignment profile. So maybe I want to add a markup in here. So I go into the markups, or go into the alignment profile drawing, and then I can see that I've got an alignment somewhere, I've got a profile somewhere. I can add a markup that says, please move this road, or please adjust that so that it's pointing now to the location of my building. And of course, I opened the wrong version of the drawing. So that alignment and profile drawing would then be available as a viewer. I would be able to see it in the viewer if I assigned a markup or created an issue and assigned it to a person. That person would receive an email. So in my case, if I was running the site group and I needed to have the alignment person readjust or redesign that alignment to face it the other way, I would go in and create a markup, assign it to the person, or excuse me, not a markup, create an issue, assign it to the person and ask them to, perhaps relocate the end of the road to the western half of the site instead. So then they would get an email, they would be able to go in and see the markup. If they're still currently in the drawing, all they would need to do is go into this file, take that alignment and make the revisions. So I'm just going to do a quick, edit here and just say, it's about there in this case. So I make a quick edit to my alignment. I'm going to save that. And then when it's saving, it's also going to run this in the background through the desktop connector. So if I've got the desktop connector open and I can see, there's some actions in there, or when it's syncing, it's going to sync back to the cloud version here. So I've got my desktop connector open in the background. Let me get to it. Sorry, I got too many windows on the side. There would be a pending action that pops up, and then I would see the file, the name, the time, what it's going to be doing, which is typically going to be syncing there, and then the source file. So pending action count 0, that means it's already likely been completed. If I go back to my alignment and profile drawing here, do a quick refresh. Sorry, wrong project. So I just did a quick search for projects there. There's a filter that you can use so that you don't have to go through the full list of everything that you see. Then I've got the right project this time. And if I take a look at my alignment and profile drawing, when I look at it in the viewer, I can already see that the change that I made, once it's been synced up there, I can see that it's now showing me the current road ending to the west instead of the east. So that change has been made. Back inside of my drawing, in the site grading plan, I see data shortcut definitions change. So I've already got a warning in there, and synchronize should take me back to the most current version. So now it's detected that there was a change made, even though it is part of the cloud. So even from a cloud-based location there, Civil 3D will be able to detect the change and pop up that synchronization window. So very, very similar to what we see with standard data shortcut workflows. If you know that something's changed, or if you're constantly in communication with someone and they've told you that they've made a change, but you haven't seen any warnings or anything, you can always go back and use the manual check reference status option. When you do a check reference status, it's going to run a current cross-check of all of the files that are there, and it'll tell you whether or not anything needs to be synchronized at that point. So now I've got the latest version synchronized into my drawing files all through the cloud. If I wanted to go back and say, hey, this end of the road still not quite where it needs to be, maybe drop it down about 15 feet or 20 feet. That's where you can, again, go back, make another markup or make another issue. Here on the side, we've got our tools for issues and markups. If I needed to create a new issue, all I'd simply do is create an issue and then add in the information, drop a marker in there for where it is. And I could say under the description there, we need to move the end of the driveway down 20 feet, whatever it is. And then when I assign it to a certain person, perhaps me in this case, or Scott is my collaborator on this one, Scott would get an email, or I would get an email with that. I'm not going to create an actual issue there, because issues and published markups, all of these things are permanent pieces of your project. So when we create these types of things through the BIM 360 online portal, That's all permanent. There's no way to delete these markups and issues once they've been published out to the group. So if you have a private markup, you can still delete that and edit that. Issues, RFIs, all of those things, once it is published to the project itself, it's permanently going to be there. There's no way to go back and remove it. Same thing goes for versioning of files. So you can see here that I have 5 versions. Right now, there are some versions that are just minutes apart. So I can see version 2 to version 3 is only about 3 minutes apart. Version 3 to version 4 is about 4 minutes apart. And those, based on the amount of information we can change in Civil 3D and how quickly we can do it, that could be a legitimate change. There could be a pretty big change that happened in 4 minutes, or it could have been just one of those where by habit we've learned over the course of the past 20 years or so that we need to save quite often when we're working in Civil 3D. So every time I click save, there's going to be a new version that gets created inside of BIM 360 Docs. So we could end up with 20, 30 versions, maybe even higher, 100 versions by the end of the project lifecycle, based on just the amount of times that you save. There's even ways to go back to previous versions. You can see here that I've got a version 3, then a version 4, then I switched it back to version 3, then went back to version 4, and then went back to version 3, and then now I saved a new one that's version 5. So we have that tracking system where it's switching back and forth between what the current version is and maybe a previous design if I've gone through different alternatives. It will actually even detect the version change as a synchronization requirement in data shortcuts. So if version 3's alignment and version 4's alignment looks a little bit different, and I switch version 3 back to the current one, even though I didn't make any technical design changes, it's just changing the file, that does actually trigger a data shortcut change. So when I synchronize there again, I would see version 3 alignment instead of version 4 alignment. If you do need to see what the differences are between 2 versions, you can always compare. So when we do a compare versions, you're allowed to choose 2 files from the list, and then it's going to allow you to either compare them side by side or compare them in a sort of overlay fashion. So excuse me, not side by side, one on top of the other here where we've got color coded. So I can see version 3 is the blue one that's color coded there. Version 5, the most current, is the one that is pointing to the left. If I want to see sort of a slider bar instead of that, I could switch to the slide version, and like as I move the slider bar left and right, I can see what's being changed. So I can see that as I move to this way, that piece of the alignment's there when I move that way. So it's essentially just sliding one version over the other. And these are all functions that are available through the online portal. So this is all stuff that you can get to through BIM 360 Docs when you log in through a web browser. And that viewer supports multiple different file formats. You can look at PDFs in there, you can look at AutoCAD drawings, Civil 3D drawings, Revit files. You can even look at Infraworks models through the online viewer, and you'd still be able to see what's in that information. You're not going to be able to design anything, but you can view the data that's there through the viewer itself. All right. So BIM 360 for Civil 3D, we're looking at primarily data shortcut workflows that are accessible through the cloud, working files, folder paths, things like that. They're all going to be now accessible through the cloud. When we're looking at further pieces of collaboration beyond just the Civil 3D area, so this is the infrastructure. So BIM 360 for infrastructure. Infraworks is part of the infrastructure suite. And it's part of the AEC collection now. So if we're looking for ways to do collaboration through infrastructure, for Infraworks, you can actually host and house Infraworks models in the cloud. And that gives us actually a much more live collaboration type of environment. So we've done a few tests with these in-house, and we've actually found that through Infraworks, if you are able to house a model in a BIM 360 Docs project, members who have full read-write access to the folder locations where those Infraworks models are saved would be able to access those models through their Infraworks installation. And if they were to create a proposal, or if they were to work in any active proposal, once we synchronize that, it pops up on everybody else's models. So I have a model in here that we've been working on. It's a little island in northwestern Washington. And this was just something that it was small enough that we could download it pretty quickly. And then there's also a little nice grass area here that we could do some design on. So there's a walking path around to I think it's a museum, and it's in a little bay. But most of the island outside of that is really just grass or forested area. So we downloaded this model, and I had one of our other technical specialists up in Calgary open it up and draw some stuff in as well. So I ended up creating my own proposal, and then James, who's up in our Calgary office, created his own proposal as well. And what we were able to find out is that if we were both simultaneously working in the model, so we could both open up the model at the same time in Infraworks, I could establish my own proposal with my own designs. He could establish his own proposal with his own designs. Once we went through and said, we want to sync these changes. So there's a little sync tool up in the upper right corner. When you're syncing the changes, it's going to then look at the model that's posted to BIM 360, and it's going to tell you whether changes are available and whether you want to share those changes or not. So there are some changes that have been indicated. Do I want to share my changes to the proposals, or are there no changes? If that's the case, then I would want to be syncing that. And if I were to sync it, anything that I created would then get published out to the cloud. And then if I were syncing it on my end, if someone else had published something, that information would be transferred into my model as well. If we were both working in the same proposal, the data and the objects that they're creating have just popped up in the model itself. So if I was working in this version and James ended up adding in like a cell phone tower or a landing pad for a helicopter, something like that, once we synchronize it from both ends, I would see what he's creating and he would see what I'm creating as well. So Infraworks does give you a little bit more of a dynamic collaboration function, but it is something that you need to synchronize manually. So in this case, I'm clicking on synchronize to publish the information that I want, and I'm also clicking on synchronize to download the new information that I need to share. And in this case, there's not a lot of options in terms of, do I only want to synchronize certain pieces or do I want to synchronize everything? It's pretty much you're going to get everything that's in there. So it's not specific to the point of check boxes that I can choose specific items or non-specific items. So this is James's proposal. So if he was working on this live while I was working on my proposal, and when I switch to his, I can see that he's got that cell phone tower and he's got a helicopter there. I see that he's gone and actually established a road with a tunnel all the way out to kind of the middle of nowhere. And then we've got another cell phone tower there up at the top. So if we are collaborating on this through Infraworks, that does give us somewhat of a dynamic collaboration environment there. I can see that he has not integrated my road there yet. So if my proposal includes that redesigned road that was actually kind of daylighting into the water, if he needed to get to that, he would be able to switch to my proposal, get that object out of there, copy and paste it into his, or we could just go in and basically combine data sources if I share the data with him that I used for that road. And in that case, that was a Civil 3D drawing file as well. So the Infraworks model was created in Model Builder, but when I downloaded that model, it went into BIM 360. So you do have an option inside of Infraworks now. When I create a model there, you can see that I have local model storage or I have cloud model storage. After the model builder finds the data, when you choose to open it up, it's going to ask you whether you want to save it locally or save it to BIM 360. And if you choose BIM 360, you would then just need to choose a project location where you have that full folder write access to or full folder control access to. And if any other project members have the same access to that folder and they have Infraworks, the model is just going to pop up on their home screen as another option there. So, for example, Richard's created a couple here, James created a couple of different ones, and they're all now just available to me because they're all part of shared projects that we have access to through BIM 360. So local copies are still local. No one else really going to see that one, but BIM 360 cloud-based Infraworks models would then be accessible by anyone else that's part of the BIM 360 project. So we're now looking at much more in-depth collaboration through BIM 360 and Infraworks, because we are able to actually work inside of the same model at the same time, and then sync information through the option here. It is a manual sync again. It's not going to just automatically pop up. So we do have to be aware that we're going to have to click on the sync tool whenever we want to do that. So working inside of BIM 360 docs with Infraworks, again, multiple team members, they all have to have the right level of permission. The key there is, you have to have that folder control or full read, write, edit access. Otherwise, you're not really going to be able to publish any changes back to BIM 360. But you can work simultaneously, and then when you're syncing it, the changes that you have made will pop up on their models, and the changes that they make pop up in your models. So we looked at the online portal again. I just wanted to point out a couple of different things because they're all available through the main document management interface, along with the file names and the versioning. There's also columns for markups and issues and RFIs, and any files that have those items would then have highlighted icons there. So you can see screenshot's a little bit small, but my alignment and profile has a markup, corridors has a markup, and also an RFI. So that's a little bit more formal in terms of project management. And that's going to allow you to kind of quickly see what's going on and keep track of the status of different things. Any issues or RFIs that are assigned to you specifically, you're going to get emails for, and these are all permanently tracked by BIM 360. So it's not going to allow anyone to go back and delete an RFI if they want to try and remove it. It'd basically be going back and saying that this one's not valid anymore, but it's going to live there as part of the project forever. There's no way to remove that type of information from the project tracking. Version tracking is currently saved with each file, and each sync is linked to the file save. So it's not currently at the state of Revit collaboration where you can sort of set a timer for when the files are going to be synced, or you can work inside of Revit and then decide when you want to publish that file back to the cloud. With Civil 3D, everything is sort of dynamically tied into your click of the save button. So when you're working in Civil 3D, when you click save, the desktop connector is just going to kick in and is going to publish that next version back to BIM 360. In theory, you could disconnect the desktop connector, so tell it you want it to be offline, and then when you sign back in, it's gonna sync. But if everything is just sort of running in the background the way that it normally would be, every time you click save, it's gonna sync that new version of the drawing up to BIM 360. And you saw a couple of scenarios where I had up to version 13 in one of the files, and then just a version 2 or 3 or 4 in another. Individual versions from the version history cannot be deleted right now. So if I've got those 13 versions and I see a couple that are 1, 2, 3 minutes apart, and I know that nothing's really changed, there's no way for me to go back and delete just like version 7 out of the list. You can only delete the whole file. And even with deleting the whole file, it's really just putting it into a deleted files folder. So you can always go and find deleted files and get it back if you needed to. So right now, that level of control, or the specific level of control for versions and individual items is still pretty, I don't want to say low, but it's pretty limited in what it can do there, because it is trying to keep track of everything, and that's good and bad in some cases. Good thing is everything is unlimited file storage at BIM 360, so you don't have to worry about having running out of file space. It's unlimited storage in this case. Markups in BIM 360 are a little bit of an informal thing. It is something that you're really going to just be creating like cloud bubbles and then text callouts and markups there. Markups can be created privately where it's just for you, or it can be published out. So anyone that has access to the folder and the files can see them. But it's relatively low formality. When we do a markup, there's no official anything that's there. It's just kind of saved as part of the document inside of the cloud. And then, of course, there's no way to delete a published markup. You can delete a private markup, but not a published one. Issues are a little bit more formal, so there is issue tracking. Issues do allow you to assign it to actual people who would then get emails and be responsible for them. You put a due date in there and a little bit more detail. And then a higher level of detail, you've got RFIs. RFIs get logged and tracked. There's question and answer fields. There's assignments for users. There, you can add multiple reviewers for whether or not this is going to be accepted. And then it is kind of like a true official response that gets saved as part of the project history. So RFI would be basically a digital track of information that was requested throughout the course of the project lifecycle. It's just all done online instead of through paper tracking and emails that we normally would have done in the past. So RFI is kind of the higher level of formality there. And RFIs by default are not activated inside of BIM 360 Docs. It's a feature that you need to turn on when you set up the project as well. All right, we're kind of reaching the end of the hour here. It's 10:54. I just want to mention a couple of other things related to collaboration in BIM 360 with the tools. These are not necessarily design focused, so I just wanted to kind of mention that in there because you do have the ability to use these with docs access. And we've got a couple of blogs out that you can research and find more detail and some steps related to these as well. But one of the bigger things that have been picking up interest from our architecture team and architecture clients is shared coordinates and surfaces with Revit. So I was mentioning earlier subscription extensions. For 2020, the subscription extension is there for publishing shared coordinates from Civil 3D. So that's going to show up in your Civil 3D toolbox. You would then be able to publish out an XML file that gives an XYZ coordinate for a reference point inside of Civil 3D tied into a Revit model. So in this case, if I've got a Revit file that I referenced into Civil 3D as a 2D drawing, and then I went ahead and I said, this file or this building footprint is going to be where I want to establish my lower left coordinate for the surface. I could publish out that lower left coordinate system with an XYZ. And then inside of Revit, Revit has its own subscription piece that allows them to import a shared coordinate. They would link that shared coordinate file to the same reference point in the Revit model. So we'd probably pick a corner of the building, and that would bring in a location file. The location file can then be set through the location option inside of Revit, where it allows you to assign different site references. So you'd see a site reference defined by that XML file, and then it would essentially move or link that corner of the building to the XY coordinate that is published out of Civil 3D. And the benefit to that is one of the bigger issues with Revit was its lack of a geographic coordinate system. It was pretty limited in the scale and the scope of what the model could handle. So if you're more than 20 miles away from the origin point, Revit didn't really know what to do with it. So when we're now linking this shared coordinate system into a Revit model, when we publish out our surface from Civil 3D and link it to Revit as topography, that shared coordinate will automatically place the surface under the building where it's supposed to be. If you skip the process of doing a shared coordinate and you're just trying to kind of import the surface and link it to Revit or create a surface manually, there's a lot of sort of estimating and moving and sort of eyeballing the location and moving it up and down or left and right. But if you are able to publish that surface out, it's a true XYZ coordinate coming from Civil 3D that's being assigned to the corner of the building. And then when the surface gets published out, it's going to link that same XYZ from the surface into that bottom corner of the building. So it will automatically place the surface underneath the building where it's supposed to be. The nice part about that published surface tool back inside of Civil 3D is that it really reduces the amount of effort that goes into sharing a surface with Revit files. Pre-published surfaces, the workflow was pretty roundabout, where you had to set up your surface contours, copy the surface into another file, explode it down into polylines, and then save it as an Autocad file. And then inside of Revit, you got to link your Autocad file and build a topo surface off of the linked information. Now, all it is publish surfaces. It's going to ask you for a BIM 360 project. Publish that surface to the BIM 360 project, and then it's going to push it out there as a drawing file that's called shared. And when you're inside of Revit, all you need to do is go on the Insert tab or Import tab and choose Link Topography. And then when you're linking that topography, the shared file has already been prepared by the export process. This is going to pop up inside of Revit where it's supposed to be. So that's a really nice way of being able to share and collaborate surface information with Revit files. And to get the Revit drawing into Civil 3D, it was basically just export AutoCAD. There's an option to export AutoCAD from Revit. Gives you a 2D AutoCAD file of the building footprint there, and then you can XREF that into Civil 3D. If you needed a 3D version of the Revit file, you go to 3D view from Revit and export it out, and you get a 3D AutoCAD block of the Revit drawing there too. So that used to be FBX out, I think, but now you can just do it as simple export to DWG or export AutoCAD. Last couple of things, we've got mobile apps that are available for more of site work and construction management type of things. So if you're out in the field needing to access files or drawings or PDFs or RFIs, there's a BIM 360 mobile app that gets you access to a lot of those things. Essentially what it is a very similar to the cloud portal, or excuse me, the online portal through a web browser, but just built into an app on your mobile device. So it works for iPad, iOS and Android there. You want to have something relatively big enough to see, not necessarily like on a phone, but if you've got a tablet, it's pretty good for what it needs to be when you're out in the field. You don't have to bring your laptop or anything. And then of course, if anybody is interested in BIM 360, but not quite sure about how to get going with that, if you purchase BIM 360 from Imagine It, we also offer a BIM 360 for Civil 3D Jumpstart service. It's a one-day online option that allows you to work with one of our technical specialists. You can get a group of people on to that web session, and we cover account administration, project administration, document management, and then some of the collaboration tools and workflows from Civil 3D. And it's all done within usually a one-day session and all through web training. So no travel or anything required, and it is something that we can still do considering the environment that we're in with travel restrictions and social distancing. So that is the end of the presentation that I had in terms of a slide deck. I can take a look at some of the questions and answers here, or questions here. As I go through, let me read some of these. If you have BIM 360 Design, do you need one for Revit and one for Civil 3D? No. So BIM 360 Design is one entitlement. If you've got BIM 360 Design, it's basically for everything. You don't need multiple licenses for multiple products. Does Sheetset Manager work with BIM 360? That's still something that I've seen a little bit of inconsistencies with. So the Sheetset Manager, I was able to save a Sheetset to BIM 360, but based on the way that it syncs, and the desktop connector also has kind of a timer feature where if you're not using files for an extended period of time, it'll delete the cache file so it doesn't keep taking up space on your hard drive. So I've had a couple of issues with Sheetset Manager working from BIM 360 directly. So I don't know if that's something I would exactly recommend yet, but definitely still testing and still working on that one. When you load a Civil 3D surface to BIM 360, can you check it out and lock the service on your company local network and later check it back in? No. So BIM 360 and Civil 3D does not work the way that Revit central files work, where you can check out components and work on just specific components and check them back in. That's not a capability of BIM 360 Design for civil and civil collaboration functions at this time. So in order it's not something that we can do. Right now, the BIM 360 Design features are very, very much data shortcut and data sharing specific with the features and functions that we saw today. Not yet. I'm not to the point of being able to check out specific components the way that you would be able to do it with collaboration from Revit. If you are disconnected from internet service, could you access the files from BIM 360 locally, then process changes made when you're back? Yes, so BIM 360 does have a cache folder that's local on your C drive. It does work with those folders while you are in the application, and then the desktop connector is the thing that syncs it back to the cloud. So if you were not connected to the internet, you could still work from your local copies of those folders. And then when you're connected to the internet again, that's typically where you would want to sort of kick the desktop connector back into gear and make sure that it's syncing whatever you need it to sync. The only thing one of the things you wouldn't be able to do is if you are working with references that are coming from BIM 360, or if you are trying to get to files that are on your BIM 360 project that haven't been cached locally, you would not have a way to get to those. So you would still only be able to work with the data that you've got once you're offline. Can you use BIM 360 for data shortcuts for projects that are on a network drive? Theoretically, yes. So BIM 360 and the data shortcuts are a folder path. So in theory, if your main drawing was on a network drive, but you wanted to set your working folder and project folder to BIM 360 docs, it would let you do that. I would say, in addition, it's not recommended. So most of what we've seen and most of what we've heard is that BIM 360 project should stay in BIM 360 and live in BIM 360. Non-BIM 360 project should not be in BIM 360. So it's not one of these where you want to try and combine features from BIM 360 and not BIM 360. Right now, the recommendation is you're going to choose one or the other. It's either this project's going to be BIM 360 and we're going to run everything there, or this project's not going to be BIM 360 and we're going to run all of our local network. Do you ever perform manual actions within the desktop connector, or is that only a background application? If you see messages that there are synchronizations that have failed within the desktop connector, there are ways to get back to it and reapply the actions. But typically it's something that will trigger on its own. I have had scenarios where I've seen things fail to sync, and I've had to go back and reapply that action to get it to sync again. It could either be unstable internet access, or something going on with the site that day, or perhaps just something happened in the process. But there is a way to get back. It's pretty limited. It's just a right-click menu of options, but you can reapply certain actions and things if you see messages and errors that pop up. But for the most part, everything's going to run automatically in the background. How do normal users show that they've addressed their markups? So we have issues with non-admin users being able to show that they've. In order to apply changes or address markups in the cloud, they would have to be at a level of permission where they can do that. So if you've got someone that's only in view state, they may not be able to add any information there. But if they've got docs, they should be able to access markups. And markups would be something on the docs end where you can create a markup, and then if they publish it, that's where they would be able to share it with everyone else. If they don't have access to being able to publish markups that they create, they can only create private ones, then they wouldn't be able to do it or indicate it somewhere in BIM 360. They would need to communicate it another way. Does BIM 360 design work well with LiDAR, point clouds, data, and Revit in Civil 3D? That's probably something we need to take offline. I need to find out more about what you're trying to do with that one. It can store LiDAR and point clouds, but what else you want to do it would kind of determine where we go with that conversation. How do the coordinate systems for Revit and Civil 3D sync up? So the coordinate system from Civil 3D is published through that shared coordinates file. It's an XML file. And then inside of Revit, there's an import shared coordinates tool. So inside of Revit here, from my add-ins, I have an import shared coordinates XML file. That's going to allow me to link my corner of the building and my north direction with whatever file that I have. Oops, sorry about that. So I would then point it to my XML file, which I apologize, I don't have a path specific for it right now. But you choose that XML file, and then once the XML file is in there, on the Manage tab, you have a location option. The location option has a site tab, and in the site tab, you would see your site that was defined by the XML file available as an option. You choose that site that you imported and make that current, and that's going to make the published shared coordinate the current coordinate system or coordinate location for your Revit model. Once that coordinate file is set as the current coordinate for your Revit model, then what you're going to do is you're going to go over to insert and you're going to link topography. And when you link topography, you're going to go to your published surface that you sent out of BIM 360, sent out of Civil 3D and posted to BIM 360, and that surface is going to pop up in the background there. We've got a blog. I think I wrote a couple of different blogs or maybe a video for that process. So since we are over time on that one, you can check that out if you want to see more in detail for that one. The shared coordinate plugin works. Yes, shared coordinate plugin works in 2020 or previous versions. It's not out for 2021 at this time. What is the cost of the one-day web training for BIM 360? So for that one, you reach out to your account manager for that, because we can discuss what you're interested in terms of that, and then we can set up everything in a proposal for that one. But it is typically like a one-day online session. So please reach out to your account manager for more information on that one. Does BIM 360 do the file locking in Civil 3D? Yes, so file locking in Civil 3D, that icon is directly tied into the BIM 360 portal. So when you open it up, the BIM 360 portal will realize that a file is in use, and then the lock option will automatically pop up there. When the file is closed, it'll unlock the file. It's not instantaneous. So that's another thing that I should probably mention. When we're working with the cloud, you still have to consider that it is transferring data, and it's using the desktop connector to transfer data for what you're doing in Civil 3D to BIM 360 docs online. So it's not going to be like as soon as I click save, boom, it's going to be there and available for me in BIM 360. You might have to wait a few seconds, a minute or so sometimes, depending on your internet connection and how things are going that day. So it's not instantaneous, and that's just something that we all have to kind of learn to handle as we work in the cloud. So you may see versions might pop up there, but when you try to sync, it's not quite ready. So just give it a little bit of time, and then when it's ready to sync, it'll sync correctly there for you. But you can monitor the actions and things through the desktop connector. And then also, one of the things that I try to do, not only check the version, I try to look at the time on the last updated option, so that I can see if it's about the time that I was working on it there. And then I'm able to see June 11th, 10:35 a.m. So that's something that I know. This drawing is probably the most current one that I've got. So that is something that we're going to see. But it is an online sync, so it's a transfer of data, not completely instantaneous in this case. But a lot faster than having to write an email and attach a file and send it out and wait for them to get an email and download the file and save it somewhere and then reference it in for themselves. And you could do this essentially every 10 minutes if you needed to, and you'd just be clicking on sync to get the latest, compared to sending out a whole bunch of emails and trying to track that one. Slow latency creates an issues where two people could open the same drawing. Could be a possibility. I haven't seen it where two of our techs have tried to open the same file at exactly the same time, but theoretically, if you timed it right, that could be a possibility. I have not seen it happen yet, though. Anything else? It's 11:12, so we're a little bit past the hour. I apologize for going over time, but I wanted to try and address as many of these questions as I could. So thank you very much. I don't see anything else that came in over the last couple of minutes.
Thank you so much for attending. This was recorded, and we'll be able to send you a copy as soon as it's available. And have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.